All right, welcome back to Pagitt Radio. We're going to give a call to our friends Amy and Jessica, are soon to be our new friends, and get them tied into our conversation. They've written a book called Love and Salt, and so we're going to try Jessica first and see if we can make a connection. It's always sort of magical when you run your own radio show.
Technology,
You know how all these pieces are gonna eventually come together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just hope God does his part in it.
Hey, Jessica.
Yes.
Hi, Jessica. This is Doug Pagitt and Victoria Lynn. We're here with you.
Hi, Jess. Should we call you Jessica or Jess?
You can call me Jess.
Okay.
We'd be glad to. Jess. All right. Hey, Jess, we're going to give a call to Amy as well, and she's not as sophisticated with her Skyping ability, apparently.
I'm shocked.
Really? You thought she was more the Skyper?
Oh yeah, I've been having some Skype issues this morning, so I'm very impressed that I got right on.
Well, good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we're going to give a call to Amy, and we're excited to chat with you about your book, Love and Salt.
Great.
Congratulations with it.
Thank you.
Tell us, while we're waiting for Amy to get on the line here, tell us how it's going and the kinds of people that you're finding that are finding the book interesting and are connecting with it.
You know, we've been really surprised by the variety of people who have commented on it. Just all sorts of folks: Protestant evangelicals, conservative Catholics, liberal Catholics, atheists, our Jewish friends. It really seems to just sort of reach out across those lines, those denominations, and people are really responding to it, men, women.
Who did you imagine as your audience when you decided to create a book?
We definitely, when we were writing the letters, we didn't have an audience in mind beyond each other. So it wasn't until we really started thinking of this as having potential to be a book that we started worrying about that. And we definitely worried about that. We didn't know who the audience would be. We thought we had so many questions about our faith and so many doubts and so many dark moments that we weren't sure how people of faith would respond. We kind of thought maybe this is a book more for seekers. But then when we would look at it from that point of view, from people who weren't coming from a position of faith, we were like, well, we still really believe. We still talk an awful lot about Jesus. So then we thought, well, maybe we're not a seeker book. So we weren't sure if we had an audience at all. So what we really set out to do was just make the book the best book we can make it and the truest book we can make it, and really represent that experience we had of writing these letters and the journey that we went on. And it seems that it's resonating with more people than we ever could have imagined.
Hello.
Hi, Amy. This is Doug Pagitt and Victoria Lynn,
Hi.
and your friend Jess.
Hi.
Hi, Amy.
All right, sorry about that.
Hi.
I think I had a little problem on my end. So glad to have you, Amy. Jess was just giving.
Were you planning to contact via Skype, or are we doing this on the phone?
Can we do it on the phone with you?
Sure, that's fine. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So Jess was just telling us about sort of the writing process and who would find this book interesting and how over time it had developed for the two of you from personal letters into something more public.
Right.
And maybe you want to share a little bit how it was that you came to be writing these letters to one another. It was a formal decision on your part, correct? And you weren't good friends before.
That's right. We actually moved to different cities just a couple weeks after we met, after we really connected, and it was during that time that we actually had a really hard time being friends on the phone, and I think our initial connection was so intense that talking on the phone was almost embarrassing. We couldn't really fall into that daily conversation that most friends would have on the phone, and so we weren't really in touch for a while. And then Jess actually came to Chicago because she was writing a story, and we ended up talking a lot. And at that point, I had decided that I was going to convert to Catholicism, and I asked Jess to be my sponsor, and we tried to figure out how were we going to go down this road together. So we decided that we would write letters, and we conceived of it as a Lenten discipline, a letter a day for every day of Lent.
So Amy, you were going through some kind of change in your own life and thinking that caused you to start thinking about Catholicism or religion as a whole or spirituality?
I actually had been thinking about Christianity for a very long time. I had a conversion experience in college that was through a non-denominational church.
Mm-hmm.
But even from the very moment of thinking I had that experience, I was calling it into question and had a really hard time reconciling that with the way everybody else saw that. If I had a lot of doubt, that meant something wasn't quite right, that something had gone wrong. Maybe I hadn't converted, etc. So for many, many years, I stopped thinking about Christianity. I mean, of course, it was always at the back of my head. I was still reading, but I felt alienated, I guess is the best way to say it. And at the point of meeting Jess, I was starting to come back into the world of Christianity, and I'd always been very interested in the teachings of the Catholic Church and the ancient church, the church fathers, etc. So through that reading, I was finding my way back to it, and we were both doing writing about our interest in Catholicism, and so our conversations really were a catalyst for me.
And Jess, you describe yourself in the book early on as I think you said a cultural Catholic.
Yes.
It seemed like your relationship had been this constant in your life, almost like an English speaker trying to explain grammar who doesn't understand it. It almost seems like in those early letters, there's a sense that Amy has this high learning curve of trying to understand the theology and the workings of Catholic, and you're going back, excavating memories and trying to understand your relationship to something that's always been there.
That's exactly right. I was baptized Catholic as a baby. I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I lived in a Catholic culture right outside of New Orleans. It was just sort of who I was. I just am Catholic. And so although I hadn't been practicing for a long time at that point, I mean, for 10 years when Amy and I became friends, I still considered myself Catholic. But Amy had actually done much more in-depth reading in theology and apologetics than I had. So when we started talking about things, she was educating me more than I was educating her. But what I had to offer her was the experience of having grown and lived in a faith for my whole life.
And so for people who don't know the book yet, it's a series of letters that the two of you write to one another over a 3-year period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But it had started with wanting to do that over just a 40-day period, and then you liked it so much you kept going. Do I have that right?
Exactly. It's it was so wonderful for both of us, and I remember we both had a sense of grief at the end of Lent that this was going to come to an end, and then we just kept on going. And then every Lent we would recommit to a letter a day.
Like that sounds like the kind of thing that people who advocate folks doing Lenten practices always want to be the case, right? Like that you're going to pick up something during 40 days and it's going to become a habit and you'll want to keep doing it. But nobody ever does. But you two did.
Well, our penance was kind of enjoyable, so maybe we cheated on that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so you guys decide to write these letters back and forth to each other. This is in 2005, so it was before there was some of the communication technologies, that people are familiar with now, Facebook and Skype and Google Chat and all that. But there were lots of ways you could have communicated that wouldn't have been so arcane as like writing a letter and putting it in an envelope and putting a stamp on it and having someone carry it in a truck to the other person's house and hand deliver it. Right? So why did
if we could have enlisted some carrier pigeons, we definitely could have.
Send it by owl.
Yeah, put it in a bottle and throw it in the ocean and waited for someone to come upon it. So what I can only imagine that not only the writing process itself as opposed to talking out loud to each other, but that there must have been something that you found either interesting or that you found valuable after you were into it of the delay, the because you could have written an email to each other and still not said things, but had it show up in 2 seconds rather than 2 days. So what was there something about that writing, not just the writing of it as opposed to saying it, but the sending it and having to wait for it to arrive?
I think you're getting at something really important in letter writing, and there's two sides of it. There's the composing of the letter, and then there's the receiving of the letter. Mm-hmm. And I think in the composing side, writing a letter is so much more silent, and you're so much more in solitude than when you're on the computer. You can't get rid of that world of noise when you're sitting there with your email or Facebook or whatever is available. That is a world of noise. Whereas if you go away from the computer and you're alone with your thoughts, you really are in solitude, but you're imagining this response. And then on the other side, you are waiting for the response. And I think that is a very spiritual experience. Having the faith to wait, to not only imagine that a response will come, but then to be waiting for it. And it's to me, it mirrors the situation of prayer much more closely than other
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Jess, you were going to say something about that.
I was going to say some of what Amy said, but also there's something about that physical artifact, the receiving of the letter, which you can then save and see. It's not so, I mean, we can save our emails, but it's not, you could see these letters piled up at the end of Lent, this stack of 40 letters from Amy, and she would keep a stack on her nightstand. And there's something about that physical reminder of a friendship, which is largely unseen, especially if you are long distance friends, that there's just something beautiful and rich about that you don't get from email.
So did you handwrite these letters, or did you type them? How did you craft the letters?
We often handwrote because the idea of doing a letter a day, you kind of had to do it when you could. So you didn't always have the luxury of being at your computer. So we would often handwrite them. But we did also type them on computer, but we never sent them through an email. We would always print them out and put them in an envelope.
So did you keep a copy? Did you make a photocopy or something of your own letter that you sent to
No. And when we started doing the book, I think we wished we had.
So in that way, like it's interesting to me. I'm sort of picturing this, it was like you crafted these little gifts to one another and then exchanged them, and you gave it up. And I would imagine that letter went, and when you got back a response to that letter, you may not have always remembered all that you had written in your own letter, right? Because it's like a letting go of it, and now it's gone, and you can't look back.
Absolutely, that's exactly. Just what do you say about that? And you say something about worrying about the crazy things you will have said, because as soon as you drop it down the chute, it's gone.
Yeah,
exactly. I said I sometimes felt like they were written in ecstatic fits, and I was sure I'd be shocked by what I'd written. But there was something really freeing about that too, as a writer. You're constantly writing your essays and then editing your essays and just poring over them again and again and again and again. And to write something and then just let it go, not have a copy, just give it to someone else. And I really believe that we went places in our writing that we wouldn't have gone otherwise.
You say...
We went go ahead.
Oh, I was just there's a quote from Amy here that says, "I just read 2 letters from you and thought about the beautiful excess in our letter writing. There's a conversation that happens. I respond to this line or you respond to that line, but so much of it seems to be sent out into the air. We can always imagine that the other one reading our words, though. So maybe I should have said instead, sent out into the loving air." It's quite beautiful, that idea of excessiveness. And
yes, very much. I guess because it's the hiddenness of it, and I like what you're saying about the forgetting what you've said, and just that you are just giving this up to somebody else. One discussion I read about letter writing, they talked about each letter being a piece of intimacy and a gift of the self. And I really think that what you are trying to do when you're telling stories to each other is really trying to make a gift of the self. You're trying to get across something that's very deep inside of you. And a lot of times I think through that writing process, you're able to discover it yourself. So you don't really know it until you've written it, and then you give it away. So it's a very intimate exchange.
And it seemed like they changed. I haven't finished the book, unfortunately, but I've gone through the point where Amy has a horrible tragedy. I don't know if I should say, because our listeners might want to read, and I don't know if we want to have spoilers. But there's a terrible tragedy. Yeah. That's the part where I am. But it seems like the quality of your letter writing shifts through the course of that tragedy. It seems like they were a bit more formal. There were always qualities of your life bursting through, but they had a more formal quality, and then they became, I think, less formal, would you say? Did you feel the quality changing, or maybe less self-conscious would be a better way to describe them as you went along? Did you feel a shift as your friendship changed, the quality of the letters changed?
Well,
I definitely
people
think
have
they
told us
became
that,
less
and
self-conscious.
I haven't really been able to see that myself. I think, Jess, do you want to say something about that? Because I know that people have commented on the shift in your writing in particular.
I think that, as I said before, I had never really studied theology. I never read apologetics. I really hadn't until I started these letters with Amy, and going on her journey with her, I started reading everything that she was reading. So um, I think that my faith matured a lot through those letters, but I also think that the intimacy that we achieved changed the way that I spoke with her, obviously, as the letters went on. And as we encountered grief and tragedy, they become very raw. And I think there was no other way. There was no other way for us to write about it at that time. So
They
I
became,
can see that
yeah,
quality changing over through the course of my letters. Yeah.
I think they became much more urgent and
Oh.
desperate. I mean, in the beginning, I think our the letters were something we loved, and our faith was something we loved, almost the way you would appreciate a piece of poetry or something like that.
Right.
It was in some sense from a distance, and we just were very enraptured by the beauty of it, the beauty of all these ancient traditions, etc. But it didn't really seem initially like our lives depended on it. And the same thing
There
with
was
our
a remove.
correspondence.
Yes.
We were
Yeah.
just in love with these letters. We thought it was so wonderful what we were doing. We were in love with the idea of pilgrimage together in this wonderful project. And then as time went on, it seemed like we couldn't live without them. We couldn't live without our faith. We couldn't live without this correspondence. So it became much more intense and something we needed.
Okay, we're talking
Yeah,
with
I mean,
we're talking with Amy Andrews and
went-
Jessica Griffith. Hang on a second. We're going to just take a little break for the video piece here, and we'll be back. The book is called Love and Salt: A Spiritual Friendship Shared in Letters. It's from Jesuit Press, and it's worth picking up. So